What's going on, guys? I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and welcome back to another all-new WrestleRant book review here on the channel. The first, I believe, since the Ronda Rousey book review I did about a year ago, right around WrestleMania time. I read it, I think, right before WrestleMania, finished it, or rather reviewed it right after WrestleMania. So it's been about a year. The issue is I have so many wrestling books and non-wrestling related books that I want to get to, that I want to read and want to review here for the channel. The Becky Lynch book is still sitting behind me. I still have my copy from before it came out, and she signed it. I have yet to finish it. I just don't have the time to physically read books. But what I did notice when Saraya recently released her new book, which we're talking about here today, Saraya 9 Lives, or rather Hell in Boots, clawing my way through 9 lives, actually. When I noticed that she released the book, that there was an audio version, an Audible version, and there was like a deal on getting that and 2 other books for the next couple of months for like 99 cents a month. I'm not an Audible subscriber, but I saw that deal and I'm like, fuck it, I'll sign up for it. I want to listen to the book. I can get through it a lot quickly. I can get through podcasts and videos when I leave them on in the background while I'm working and stuff. And that's exactly what I did. I finished the Saraya Audible book in like literally less than 2 weeks. And it was well worth the listen to. It was a book that I wanted to check out going into it, and I just couldn't stop listening to it when I was listening to it. So again, this is the Saraya Hell in Boots, clawing my way through 9 lives book review. It came out a couple of weeks ago. And if you think that you know everything about Saraya, the former WWE Paige, just from watching her movie, then you are very wrong. And the movie was very good. I reviewed the movie here on the channel a long time ago, and it was great. I very much enjoyed the movie. But that being said, it only encompassed a certain, section of her life. It really only went up to her WWE debut, and it ended after that. Didn't cover anything of her WWE career, her retirement, the leaks and stuff that happened in 2017, which he gets into great detail about in this book, and everything else that's happened to her in recent years. It was a very good movie, but it was kind of premature almost in a way. I think The Rock wanted to make the movie back in 2014. They finally released it in 2017, which I'll get into. But it doesn't give you a full scope of the life and career of Paige, aka Saraya. And even now, there's so much more that she wants to do and is going to do in wrestling and outside of the wrestling world and whatever. But, releasing a book now, I'm not sure why now she wanted to release a book. She probably got a sweet deal for it. But I thought she did a really good job. I think, again, the Audible version itself that I listened to is narrated by her. So that obviously helps when the book is narrated by the person who wrote it. And I think she does a much better job, in my opinion, than Ronda Rousey did, whose book I thought was good. But Saraya comes off a lot better. The verbiage and the writing in which she used, probably in the book that she read out in the Audible version, I thought was great. It was very accommodating. It was like kind of relaxed and conversational. For someone who obviously got some help writing this book, for someone who had never written a book before, to my knowledge, I thought Saraya did a very good job. So basically, I'm not going to go through every single chapter, but I kind of wrote some notes down of things that I wanted to bring up. A good section of the early portion of the book talks about her upbringing in England, a lot of which is discussed in the movie, but not really gone into great detail about. For example, she actually cites an incident, or multiple incidents, at least one, where she and her brother, I believe Zach, were sexually abused as kids. Like a disgusting section of the book, in the sense that it was disgusting that it happened. And I'm glad she brought it up and acknowledged it, because that sort of stuff happens. That obviously was not acknowledged in the movie, to my knowledge, to my memory. I watched the movie 5-6 years ago, but I don't think that was ever brought up, nor should it have been. Would have been a damper on the story. But you have to bring up this sort of stuff because it does happen to people every single day. So she goes into detail about that and the fallout from that with her family, and how it was someone that I think they let into their home because the family, the parents, are so great with trying to be good people and welcoming people off the streets that may not have homes, that were kicked out, or whatever the case might be. And this person seemed normal. It wasn't this random ass person, this random ass stranger. They seemed normal. They seemed nice. And sometimes those are the people that end up being the, biggest culprits of this sort of stuff. So I thought it was great that she went into that and kind of discussed it in detail here in the book, although it can be triggering for certain people. So just a fair warning on that. She talks about her own issues with alcohol and being an alcoholic at various points in her life and having to overcome that, specifically when the leak stuff happened back in 2017. So she details her issues with alcohol and drugs. She outright just says she did cocaine. Around probably 2016, 2017. I don't know if she said exactly when she started, but she does say that she was doing it like when the whole Del Rio stuff happened, which I'll get into in a moment. She was doing like flat out cocaine. That's why she was busted for the suspensions. She talks about when she was suspended by WWE when she still worked there twice in 2016. I remember that. I completely forgot about it, but she was busted not once, but twice by the WWE wellness policy. And she claimed at the time it was like medication stuff and her dad went to bat for her, but she was telling her dad lies. And she knew she was telling her dad lies, but she was so warped up in this idea that she was the victim that she just publicly lied about it when WWE was 100% right to suspend her and publicly announced that she was basically, it was drugs. Like it wasn't, whatever it could have been. I don't know what WWE exactly said at the time, but they all but confirmed at that point in time in 2016, 2017, that it was like cocaine related or whatever. So I thought that was crazy. She talks a lot about her time in NXT, which I thought was cool, getting called up to the main roster, dealing with the backstage drama at that point, how Summer Rae was really cool with her, Bray Wyatt, Big E, they were all very nice to her in FCW and then in NXT and then in the main roster. She talks about how the debut kind of came together. That's a story that she shared a million times in interviews and obviously in the movie itself, meeting The Rock the day prior. I thought that was made up for the movie. I thought The Rock just wanted to get himself in the movie because he helped produce it. His company, Seven Bucks Productions, they helped make that movie. They helped produce the movie. So I thought he was just wanting to be in the movie, but that actually happened where The Rock encountered her at WrestleMania the night before and told her about her debut. And he wasn't supposed to, Paige had said. He kind of leaked the news to her, and that's how she found out. She didn't find out she was supposed to debut and win the Divas Championship that night until the day of, like literally hours before the show. So thankfully she had a heads up. She also talks a lot about Brad Maddox, obviously, who was involved in the leaks, and he was actually the one responsible for the leaks getting leaked. Not that he was the one doing the leaking, obviously, but because he recorded everything that he and Paige were doing sexually and whatever at that point during their time in NXT. And she mentions that he was actually, which I forgot about, and this was probably public knowledge, but I just forgot, he was actually married and had a kid on the way when they were doing stuff. And I think she wanted to kind of put it in the past. And they weren't like doing stuff still by 2017 when that stuff came out. They kind of put it to a close when she kind of noticed he was being weird and not really happy for her. She mentions him by name in the book a lot. And how he seemed nice and how he was kind of there for her when she first got to NXT and she was lonely in the United States because she had to move to the States by herself. She ended up finding more friends and moving in with other people. But the whole Brad Maddox relationship is actually discussed in great detail. Probably not that she needed to discuss it in great detail, but again, he was the one that was involved in the leak. She actually also discusses Xavier Woods and how he wasn't really super involved with that sort of stuff. He is in one of the videos, but it was him just kind of going along, not really doing it nefariously. Not that Brad Maddox was doing it nefariously, but to record the whole thing was kind of weird in and of itself. And then obviously it got leaked years later and she even says in the book, it didn't come from like my iCloud. It wasn't anything I had stored. It was entirely his. And that's why, it was kind of, she ate all the shit for that. And Brad Maddox ended up getting fired anyway, like in 2014, 2015 maybe. He was gone from the company well before the leaks happened. So it's not like he suffered any real repercussions for it. He never really wrestled again, to my knowledge. But anyway, she talks about Brad Maddox a lot. She talks a lot about Total Divas, her time on that show, and how they actually encouraged bad behavior. She was big with pranks and drinking and the drugs and, like I said, partying. She was big into all that sort of stuff. And the Total Divas lifestyle kind of enhanced that. She had a lot of positive things to say about AJ Lee, and she mentioned how AJ Lee, during her time in WWE, I'm sure was offered to do the show, but instead she said no. She stuck by her morals, and she actually made fun of people that were on the show for an on-air promo on Raw, which was great back in 2013. It's probably part shoot, part kayfabe, mostly kayfabe, but I'm sure there were elements of reality in that promo. Didn't do her any favors backstage, but she probably didn't give a shit. But anyway, she took up the offer to do the show because she wanted more fame, more exposure, more money, whatever, which is what the show gave her. But it also was kind of a vehicle to kind of encourage the partying and the drinking and all the other stuff I mentioned. So she talks about Total Divas, being with Alicia Fox in the show, who was a really sweet person. She also mentions the filming of the movie, because like I said, she found out that the movie was being made about her life in 2014 at WrestleMania 30 weekend. The movie did not end up coming out until 2019. So you're probably thinking, and I was thinking at the time, why did it take 5 years to make this movie? So she talks about the filming of the movie and whatnot, but she also mentioned because of her issues, they had to put it on hold. So when she was struggling in 2016, 2017, not only with a neck injury, because they did sideline her from action in 2016, but during the whole Del Rio phase where she was doing drugs and getting into public fights and shit like that, and all this other bad publicity that she was getting, they outright said to her, specifically the guy that's not there anymore, the head of talent relations, not John Laurinaitis. His name escapes me at the moment, but she mentions him by name a lot. He was fired back in 2021, I think, for what they called Trashgate in WWE. He was a real piece of shit, too. But she mentions that he had said to her that we didn't know if he would still be alive to make the movie. Like, I think Triple H even told her that when she came back to the company in Return to the Ring back in 2017. So that's why the movie, they didn't even know if it would have a happy ending. So the movie may never been finished, or if it was, it may have had a completely different ending if she ended up dying, or not worse, but like if she had a similar fate where she ended up going to jail or just whatever and ended up getting fired or whatever it might have been. So I thought that was interesting that she brought that up. And she was very honest throughout the book, which I very much appreciated. Like I said, she talked about the suspensions, and she goes into detail about the tapes and attempting suicide during that time, which I think she's talked about publicly, but that was a very dark section of the book when the leaks happened in early 2017, and she was all by herself. She was off the road at this point. She was not on Raw. She was not working weekly. She was at home recovering from her neck surgery and her neck injuries and whatnot. And she was still struggling with just a whole bunch of issues. And I think she was living by herself at that point. So, again, trigger warning for anyone that's experienced that sort of stuff as far as like the suicide attention stuff. So, I thought it was nice that she was honest about that. So, like I mentioned before, I mentioned Del Rio a couple times. She actually makes no mention of Del Rio in the book at all. There's plenty of talk about Brad Maddox in the role that he had in her life at that stage of her life in 2013 and early 2014 before they broke it off, and obviously the leaks as well. It's not like she only brought him up about the leaks. And she probably referenced the role that he had in her life because the leaks came out in 2017. But she talks a fair amount about him, all the stuff that you would expect, but I thought it was nice that she was honest. She mentions a lot about Ronnie Radke, who I think that's how you pronounce his name. They split up just recently, actually, or at least it came out publicly a couple of months ago that they split up. I think they probably split up late last year. She doesn't mention that in the book. The book came out recently, but she was probably finished writing it a couple of months ago, so she doesn't discuss them breaking up, or she hasn't even said publicly why they broke up. So a lot about Ronnie in the book, a lot about Maddox. She even mentions the boyfriend, which I totally forgot about. The guy from A Day to Remember. I don't remember his name, pun intended. Or not, pun not intended, actually. Who she was proposed to on Total Divas. She said he was a real sweetheart of a guy, and the Total Divas producers wanted him to propose to her on the show, knowing that she was going to say no. She actually said yes, and then turned around and said no later on in the episode. A complete fucking train wreck. I remember, I've seen every episode of Total Divas, don't shame me. I remember that, but it was like a decade ago. I totally forgot about it. So she even brought that up in the book. But there is not a single mention of Alberto Del Rio. Now, that's totally her right. It's her book. She can get into whatever she wants. But it is interesting, though, because, again, it's not as if they were together for a week, for a month. It's not as if it was a secret thing. They were very public about their relationship. Very, very strange that there's no mention of Del Rio in the book. And that's probably the biggest thing that people might go into this book expecting her to mention or talk about. That there is not even his name. She never mentions Del Rio or El Patron, his real name, Alberto. Nothing. Literally nothing. She mentions everything that she was experiencing at that point, like the drug issues and the dark time in her life, but she never makes a mention of Del Rio, which I thought was very interesting. Now, I don't know if that's a case of like an NDA sort of thing where she can't mention him or she just chooses not to because it's not good for her. I think she may have referenced him in an interview or something not that long ago, not recently, but like a few years ago, and he got all pissy. He's obviously a piece of shit. He's had other issues with like his current wife or now ex-wife, whatever, where she charged him with domestic abuse and then she dropped the charges. He seems like a real piece of shit. So maybe she didn't want to get her hands dirty with that for a potential lawsuit or something. But again, a lot of the shit that she was doing, and she talks about, in pictures, I look so skinny and frail. It was when she was with him. And obviously, the influence that, everyone's responsible for their own actions, but he was very much, I'm sure, a negative influence on her at that point. He was a lot older than her, and WWE even tried to separate them. That relationship was acknowledged on Total Divas. It's not as if it was a secret. I remember WWE putting them on separate brands, and the brand extension in 2016 didn't end up mattering because Paige ended up getting suspended and hurt. She was off the road anyway. And then Del Rio ended up leaving the company like a month or two later. But there must be some sort of like an NDA thing in place, or at the very least, she just doesn't want to talk about it, which again, she doesn't have to. It's her book. She can leave out whatever she wants. But she mentioned pretty much everything else that you would expect her to talk about in great detail, except for Del Rio. So that was my biggest takeaway from the book. I don't know, maybe she, again, didn't want to shit on him at the risk of getting sued or just getting into a whole fucking mudslinging fight with this guy over like, you did this, and then he says otherwise. Like, again, there's videos, you can go out there and find them on YouTube of like TMZ footage of them screaming at each other in airports, and they later said it wasn't that big of a deal. It was a fucking time, dude. Like, we were all saying, a lot of people were saying at the time, what the fuck is she doing with this guy? And thankfully, they ended up breaking it off before it was too late. But he even proposed to her, and she said yes! She said yes. So again, that was a very big chapter that I thought was glossed over, obviously on purpose. I'm just curious what the reason was. We probably won't find out. It doesn't really matter. But he's a real piece of shit. So if it gives her any, I don't know, clarity or whatever to have not mentioned him and not relive that specific section of her life, then all power to her. Whatever is honestly better for her, that's probably for the best. So anyway, she talks about the WrestleMania. This was not a real big deal, but she mentioned how she had to retire because Sasha Banks kicked her in the back and it accidentally injured her to the point where she like was almost paralyzed. Thankfully, she wasn't. But she had to call it a career in 2018. So the timeline was kind of off a little bit. She goes, oh, we were supposed to do this big WrestleMania Battle Royal, and they ended up doing it without me, and I was on commentary for it. She kind of like lumps that in with the Women's Rumble, which she was supposed to be in 2018. It was a weird timeline of events. She kind of messed up that because she said, oh yeah, I announced my retirement before the Battle Royal, and then I did the she didn't do the Battle Royal anyway, obviously, but she announced the retirement, and then she was on commentary for the Battle Royal. That's actually not true. She retired, and then she mentioned how WWE told her, don't announce it publicly, save it for the night after WrestleMania on Raw in New Orleans, which is where she debuted 4 years earlier, so that made sense. And then because she mentioned how when she retired, she became a GM, but then she did the Battle Royal anyway, just on commentary. The timeline of events was kind of weird. She got injured, was off. Well, she was on TV, maybe. I don't know if she was on or off TV. But she didn't wrestle, obviously. And then the WrestleMania Battle Royal happened, which I think was won by Naomi that year in 2018. Then she announced her retirement, and then she became GM. So just for anyone listening, you probably already know the actual timeline of events, but it was kind of out of order in the book. Not that big of a deal. She talks about her get shit or eat shit, get hit tattoo, or talk shit, eat shit, whatever the fuck the tattoo is on her hands. She said she plans on getting them covered up at some point as of this writing or as of this recording. I'm not sure if she has or not. She regrets it in retrospect. That was a dumb decision, she admits. There's obviously other tattoos that I think she got a tattoo for Del Rio, actually, which again, she doesn't mention. But she talks about her tattoos and regretting that. WWE's, Mark Carano, that's his name, Mark Carano. That was the guy in charge of PR, not in charge of PR, in charge of talent relations that I was trying to remember his name earlier. How he saw the tattoo and he freaked out because you got to get all that shit cleared by WWE. So she talks about what went into that. Pulling a lot of pranks, including on Titus O'Neil, who got really, really pissed. And she had to go see Vince over that, and even Vince was like, what a baby. Obviously it's Titus's prerogative. If he doesn't want to be pranked or bothered, then I wouldn't bother him. He was on a list to not be pranked, probably as part of that Swerve show that they did on WWE Network years ago, and then she did it anyway. Just small stories like that she shares in the book. She talks about dating Ronnie Radke, a lot of positive things to say about him, so there's a lot of stuff out there about him, shit that he has said, shit that he continues to say, shit that he believes in. I won't get into that here, but in the book anyway, she has a lot of positive things to say about him, how he was there for her, helped her. They started out as friends. She had a whole health issue, actually. She had, I forgot the exact word, but some sort of a pregnancy where she wasn't like, she was pregnant, but she wasn't pregnant. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was a real serious situation where she was bleeding out at her house. And he had to fly back from a tour that he was on. He wasn't home at the time. He had to fly back, and he was there for her. I forgot the exact word, so I won't say it here, but it was a pretty serious, like, miscarriage type situation, which is basically what it was. But anyway, while she was dating him, she talked about how they kind of collectively stopped vaping and drinking together, which is positive, and eating healthier and becoming vegan and whatnot. She talks a lot about her dog that they got named Lobster. I think that's like a Friends reference or something like that, or I forgot. It's something like that. But she talks about her dog, the miscarriage situation, the whole Twitch thing. Remember the Twitch thing from 2020? Not really pertaining to her. I mean, as it pertains to her, but like the WWE Twitchgate, where they banned everyone from using Twitch as soon as they found out how much money they were making from the streams. And she even mentions that in the book. She mentions from her perspective, and I don't know if she's talked about it publicly beyond this, but she mentioned here in the book that WWE, this was during COVID. So, like, in her specifically, she was under contract, not doing anything. And even before COVID, they didn't really have a role for her on the show. She was the SmackDown GM, which she did a very good job at. Then they got rid of the GMs in late 2018. They brought her back a few months later as a manager for the Kabuki Warriors, which kind of ran its shelf life. Had a very short shelf life, and that ran its course by like the summer of 2019. They took her off TV at that point. Then they had her doing nothing, especially during COVID, where they weren't flying people in and they had no role for her on the show. She may have made one appearance by like fucking like over Zoom or something on SmackDown, and that was really it. So she ended up taking up on Twitch. Like, she cooked a lot more, and she started a cooking show, and then she was twitching, which sounds weird, but like she was doing a video game through Twitch, the video game channel through Twitch. WWE found out about it, specifically how much money they were making from it. And after that, they told her to pull the plug. They actually fired Zelina Vega over it, who portrayed, I think, either, not Paige, but rather AJ Lee in the Fighting With My Family movie, actually. And then she freaked out about it in a stream. She vented her frustrations, got all upset about it, was crying over it and whatever during the stream, and WWE never bothered her about it again. I mean, obviously later on, they ended up working out a deal, I think, with the talent where they take some money from it, or they manage the Twitch streams. I don't know how many active WWE superstars still do that. They probably said, fuck it, it's not worth it anymore if WWE is going to take a cut of it. I think Dakota Kai still may do it, maybe Zelina Vega. I don't think Paige has done it since she joined AEW. But she talks a lot about that. And then she also talks about leaving WWE in 2022, her contract not being renewed. It wasn't a decision on her part to leave. They just didn't want to renew her contract. And then she also got a call right after her contract expired from Triple H. This was in the midst of when Vince was out of the picture, and then Triple H came in. He had no idea why she wasn't there anymore. He goes, "Why aren't you with us anymore?" He called her up, and she was like, "Well, you guys didn't renew my contract." And he said, "Well, that's not okay. Well, I'll send you a new contract. We could discuss dates. We can have you come in," I think as a general manager, he mentioned, which is what she was doing a few years earlier. But he wanted to bring her on as a GM, use her on the show, less states as far as like flying. The travel would be a lot less than having to be on TV or be on the road every single week. And maybe even clear her to compete, which at that point she was not cleared. But he said they would maybe look into it. Well, was that a false promise? Would they have re-signed her and then attempted to clear her and then she wouldn't be cleared? We have no idea. What we do know is that she went to AEW instead, which was probably the right decision. She said Jericho got in contact with her because she was obviously very close with Renee Young, is very close with Renee Young, Renee Paquette. She ended up going to AEW too because her husband Jon Moxley already works there, so they went there together. Renee even said that, Saraya said, she goes, Renee told her, "Hey, listen, if you go there, then I'll go there too." And that's exactly what happened. Saraya showed up in September 2022 at Grand Slam. Renee debuted about a month later on Dynamite in October, I think in Canada, which is where she's from. So they went there together. But she had a lot more freedom in AEW, and she doesn't really go into great details of the run itself. This is the very end of the book where she talks about the run there. But she does talk about the All-In 2023 title win, where she became AEW Women's World Champion. Getting the music, which she was told initially that she couldn't. That was the We Will Rock You song, obviously. And they ended up giving it to her for the entrance, and her family was there, an amazing moment for her. She ended up losing the championship shortly thereafter, but she was really grateful for that moment. And in retrospect, now that she's not there anymore, I'm glad she got that moment. I thought that was a great moment. So yeah, that was really about it. She wrapped up with that. She talks about her brother Zach as well, him getting an AEW tryout and how that really meant a lot to her. He also is no longer with AEW. Obviously, none of that's discussed in the book. She actually announced while she was doing promotion for this book that she was no longer with AEW. And she also, it was around this time, and maybe shortly beforehand, that Zach Knight's contract was not renewed or he was released or whatever. So he's also no longer in AEW. But they did have a chance to work together on the show in Ring of Honor, and not in Ring of Honor, but specifically in AEW television, like on fucking Rampage or something. He worked in Ring of Honor. They had a chance to do some stuff together on the show, which is cool, and I'm sure that was like a bucket list item for her. So, in a nutshell, not real in a nutshell, this has been a long video, but that was the book. That was the book. I very much enjoyed it, actually. It might have been around 9 hours, I want to say, the Audible version. I don't know how long it's going to take you to read if you read the actual book, but if you buy a book, if you buy a copy of the book, I think she's actually at WrestleMania weekend in Las Vegas, which is next weekend as I'm recording this right now. So you can meet her, have her sign it. And yeah, I thought she did a very good job for someone who I believe has never written before, like in terms of a book. Saraya, that is the former Paige from WWE. I thought she did a great job. Having her narrate it was also good. And again, it came across as very conversational. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this, and I don't like to compare, but I thought this was better than Ronda's book, which I thought was good. But like just the way that she came across and the way that it was written, it was kind of like very, very similar to her WWE promos, if you catch my drift. The Saraya book I enjoyed. I thought it was a good read, a good listen, rather, and I would well recommend it to anyone, a fan of hers or just a fan of wrestling in general. I think it's a good book worth checking out. So that is Helen Boots, Clawing My Way Through 9 Lives, available right now through Audible and all your favorite podcast. Probably on podcast version as well, but book retailers, Barnes & Noble, check it out online. It's well worth the read, so check it out now. If you're traveling to Vegas, you can listen to it on your way. So thank you guys for checking out my latest book review here on the channel. I'm not sure what my next book review is going to be, but as part of the aforementioned Audible deal that I got, I have 2 more Audible credits that I can use in the coming months, one in late April and another one in late May. Probably will be 2 wrestling books, but at some point I want to finish the physical Becky Lynch book that I have and do a book review on that. I know the book came out a year ago, but I also read and reviewed Hardcore Holly's book over a decade later, so it's never too late, I suppose. Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. The other book reviews that I've done here on the channel are down below in the description box, so check that out. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications to be notified every single time we upload a new video and every single time we go live here on the channel. New content going up every single day through WrestleMania and beyond, so please consider subscribing and also becoming a channel member to get a video like this first, early, and ad-free before everyone else. Among all the other perks, more details are in the description box down below. Thank you guys again for checking out this video. I appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.